Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tip of the Week. I am finally back in Montreal and happy to be home for a few days at least. So what I wanted to do this week was I wanted to talk a little bit about how to rig a head. And I'm taking kind of what I went over in that eyeball rig a while back, and I'm going to be expanding that concept out to what I'm going to talk about today with the head. So I'm going to try and do this as a quick tip, so I might have to split this up into a couple of different segments, one for this week and one for next week. But I'll do my best to go through it as simply as possible. So I'm doing this here in Animate Pro just to show that you can do it with Animate Pro, but you can do it in Animate Pro or Harmony. It's not possible to do these types of complex rigs in Animate because it's just too far from what you can accomplish there. So what I did was I prepared some artwork, and so I basically just cut apart a head. So I've got one layer there for the face. Let's check out in the drawing view to isolate that layer on its own. So I've got one layer for the face, or for the head. I've got the eyeball, and I label things with front and back because if you ever swap the head horizontally, if you do label with left and right, when you flip horizontally, the left and right will be reversed. If you label things front and back, even if you flip, front is always going to be front. So it makes much more sense to go front and back. So I've got the front eye, front pupil, eye, back pupil, nose, mouth, eyebrows, hairline, and then I've got a few curls on the hair, and I've got an ear. And then I've more or less kind of laid these out where I want them to be in space, but it doesn't really matter because I'm going to do my real ordering over in the network view. So the first step here to do is to actually put pegs on all of those drawings. So I selected all the drawings and I hit that add peg button. And the reason that add peg button is nice is because it will not only add the peg layers, but it will label them accordingly. So that now I'll be able to go in my network view and I'll be able to see very easily what's going on here. Now, of course, when you first pop in here, things are a lot messy, so it would be nice to be able to reorder the timeline. So I can go to Windows Toolbars and Network View, and from here I will select the last network or the last node in my network, which is usually either display or the right node, or both of them are in the same spot for your default scene. And then you can click on the button for Order Network Up. It's the one with the up arrow. And then what that does is it goes up the network and it orders these things for you automatically so that you can get in there and quite easily be able to order those things. So now from here, what I want to be able to do is I want to rig these so that I can move all the facial features together. And let's just do that first because that's going to be the easiest thing to tackle first. And you can hit Control P or Command P to add a peg. And now from here, what I'll do is I'll attach this peg to all of my facial features. So the eyebrows, the mouth, the nose, the pupils, and the eyes, but not the face. So now, if I use my transform tool, I can select all those facial features together. I prefer to leave the ear out of that group because I like to manually adjust the ear. If you want to have the ear in there, though, you can go ahead and do that. But the most important thing is that you have a peg that you can use to control the position of those facial features. And that way, when you have those facial features kind of more in the center, particularly when my eyes are in the center, then it looks more like a front view. And particularly when you have a head that's a little bit more round in shape, this works better. So you would probably actually, in addition to moving the facial features as a whole to the center, you'd also want to move the eyes further apart, and that's how you'd get your front view. And you may want to have a drawing swap for the nose as well, which you can do. But the main point here is that we want to be able to move those facial features together as a group. And we always want to label things so that we understand what they are when we're animating. So you can click on that yellow options box there, and it'll pop up the layer properties so you can say facial features. And I always like to leave that peg on the end so that I know what it is. So from here now, what I really want to be able to do is I want to be able to cut off all of those facial features with the edge of the face. But before I get there, I'll just do a couple other rigging things. I want the eye to be a parent of the pupil. So I'll just make that connection there so I can move that eye together. Do the same thing with the front eye. I'll make the eye the parent of the pupil so I can move those together. Now on those pupils and the eyes, I'll just really quickly redo what I did in that eye tutorial, but I'm doing a simplified version here. So I'll have a cutter, and in the cutter I want, the pupil is the thing that's being cut out, so I'm going to cut the pupil out there, and you can slide an effect in there. If as you drag, if you hold down Alt, it will let you slide an effect in. So I can slide that in there. And then I want the eye to be the mask. So I can plug a copy of the eye into the left-hand side. And then I'll take that cutter and I will invert the cutter. Now in most cases you also want to be able to isolate just the white of the eye. In this case I don't have an iris, I just have a black pupil. So it doesn't matter if the black pupil is on top of the black line because they're both the same color and I can't see. But if you do have an iris, then you would also want to have a color override here that you would use to isolate the white of the eye. For simplicity's sake, because I don't need it in my example, I am just going to leave that out. But we'll come back to that concept when we look at how we're going to rig the rest of the face. So let's do the same thing here with the other eye. I will have the pupil as the thing that's being cut out. I want a copy of the eye going into the left side of the cutter, and then I'm going to invert that cutter. So now I can animate those pupils around the eye, and they'll be very nicely contained. And I can take those eye groups, and I can move the eye groups around to manipulate the eyes. And you know, I apologize for the bad artwork. I just prepared the artwork a little bit quickly here, but I wanted to really get to the meat of what I wanted to talk to you guys about, which is why I didn't want to spend too much time talking about the artwork. So now at this point what I want to be able to do is I want to take those facial features and I want to cut most of them off with the edge of the face, but not all of them. So whenever you want to group together things that you want to, you know, act as a certain thing, this is what you use a composite for. So far, I mean, I just have a composite that's at the end of my entire scene here, or my entire, you know, group of my character. But you can add another composite, and you can use that composite to group certain elements together. So I'll just connect this composite to my first composite so that whatever I connect here isn't going to disappear from my camera view. Otherwise, because the camera view is showing what you see at the display there, and the display is connected to this composite. So if my first composite's not connected to this composite, then if I start adding things or I move things from that composite into the other, you see it disappear. But now if I connect that composite down to the main composite, it reappears because the eyebrow is still going down eventually to that composite. So I'm just going to take these elements that I want to cut off with the facial, with the edge of the face, and I'm going to connect them in here. Note with the nose, I don't want to cut the nose off because I want the nose in front. So I'm not going to connect the nose here. I'll just continue on with the eyes and the other two eyes. Whoops, it looks like I did something with my connection there because I lost my pupil. So what did I do? Oops, I stuck it behind. Scooch it up in front. Remember, the left is in front and the right is behind, so just maintain the ordering the way that you have it there. So now what I've got is I've got these facial features grouped together, and I've also got grouped together in the composite, and you can see that they're highlighted in blue here. When I select the composite, it highlights them in blue, and I can see that I've got gathered together all of the facial features except for the nose. So now what I'm going to do is exactly the same thing that I did with the eye. I'll take a cutter module and I'll plug into my cutter module the composite. So in other words, all of the drawings that exist in that composite. And I'll plug into the left side of that cutter a copy of the face. Now remember, just like with the eyeball, you've got to invert that so that everything gets cut off there inside, not outside. So now if I select that facial features peg and I start to animate these things to the side, do you see that I can actually animate these directly off the edge of that face? Now the one thing that you want to be aware of, and you see that the nose stays out of that, one thing that you want to be aware of though is that you do want to select just, you want to keep that line there, so you want to select just the skin, just the skin tone. So because of that, you want to add that color override here in between the face and the cutter, because the face consists of both the black line there and the skin inside, but I only want to use the skin inside to cut those facial features with. So I can take my color override, and on my color override I'll nip this guy in there. Then what this allows me to do is I can take one of those colors, it shows all the colors that are connected there, and I'll take this, and it makes sense, actually it makes a lot more sense if you label your colors. I definitely recommend labeling your color. It's going to make it a lot easier, because sometimes you might have two colors that look the same but they're different things. So really go ahead and label your colors. But because I didn't, I'll just drag that one in there, and then you do need to check the checkbox to render selected colors only. So when I check that checkbox, what it does is at this point in time, it's just taking that face. So I can move my display just to show what that looks like. So we'll see that at the face level, this is what I've got. I've got that face. I stick it through that color override, and it isolates just the the actual skin color. And then after you see the facial features cut there, they're going to be cut if I move them. Let's just, for the sake of argument, move these guys over. See that they're going to be cut with that skin. And then now I'll stick my display back down at the bottom so that I can see what's going to happen at the end of the scene. So now I've done pretty much what I want to do with the face. And now just to talk a little bit more about what you would do when animating this is you probably have a master peg on top of all of this, but generally when you're animating, let's put a couple of keyframes on here. Actually, let's add a master peg. It's going to make it easier. So I'll add my master peg, and I'll just make this a parent of the facial features group, a parent of the face itself, and a parent of these other elements. And you might want to group together into a peg the hair elements, the curls that I've got there. I just stick a couple of curls in there just for the sake of argument to show you how you could work with hair. But you can, be creative about the groups that you create by connecting things together with a peg. Now, if I order my network up again just to keep things organized, we'll be able to see a little bit better what's going on there. And sometimes, the computer might order things in a way that isn't entirely useful to you as an individual, so you can definitely feel free to go back here and do some extra reordering yourself. So now I can take the entire character here, collapse it under my main peg, and I can extend the exposure in my scene. And I'll just create a keyframe on the first frame with F6, and I'll go to a frame later on and create another keyframe and just show you how I can go here to a profile. And when you're animating, if you select a layer and you hit B to go up to the parent, it will select the next one up. And also, when you are working with pegs, it helps to have the peg selection mode turned on your transform tool. Because what that does is when you click on the drawing, instead of selecting the drawing, it's going to select the peg directly. So it takes away one level of B that you have to hit. So in other words, when you have this off, you touch it once, and you've got to hit B once to go to the peg and B again to go to the facial features group. If you turn it on, it goes directly to the peg, and you only have to hit B once to go to the group. So from here now, I will modify that over there. Now, of course, this on its own doesn't look very exciting, but you want to move the ear over, you want to move the hairline over. Oh, and obviously I forgot to do something very critical here. You want to also make the hairline cut off with the face as well. And in this case, I probably also want my hairline to be quite a bit bigger. It looks like I did it kind of too small here. So I'm just going to select my hairline layer there, and I'll make this a lot bigger because I just want it to be pretty big. The main important thing is that I have the curve looking the way I want it to look there, but I want the drawing itself to be expanded out. And then what I'll do with my hairline is I can use that same, the face, here we go, the face that I'm using the color override with to isolate the facial features. I can use the same one on the hairline. And in fact, I could also put my hairline in that same composite with the facial features directly. Let's try that first and see if that's going to work. So let's try to put this in my facial features group, and you see now that hairline is being cut off there. And you know, obviously I might want to go back and adjust how the shape of the head is looking, because his head is a little bit egg-shaped here. But let's pretend that I love the shape of the head. Then now what I can do is from one position to the other, I can animate the hairline there, and in addition to that, I can animate those drawings. It looks like one of my drawings here is disappearing, so, oh yes, it's because I have not extended the exposure on that one. So, also it looks like that curl may have not made it into, yeah, there we go, I see it. So it didn't make it into that peg, so I want to make sure that it's connected into my master peg. And now, if I look from one to the other, I still, to make this really look like a good movement, I want to animate the position of those curls as well. So you'll animate that curl forward, this one forward. You might even have some of these curls kind of, you know. Oh, and by the way, you probably should set your pivot points as well. I didn't bother setting any pivot points on this drawing, but you want to animate the position of those guys out like so. And I think 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yes, so I missed one. So you definitely want to make sure that you get them all showing there, or you'll notice it when you animate from one side to the other side. Let's stick a pivot point on this one as well. Poof. Okay, so now I'll just animate that out like that. Maybe you even want to skew some of these things, you know, probably just move that pivot point up there, but it's, you might want to skew it a little bit and just be creative about how you're doing this. But at the end, the main thing is that you want to get that sense of things moving from one side to the other side. So now you'll also notice that there's a bit of an odd thing happening here where I can start to see the edge of this line. And the reason that is because when I drew my original head layer, if I go into the face, here it is, my face, if I take a look at this drawing, I drew this guy with a pencil line. And so because it's a pencil line, the stroke is actually filling up to the center of that pencil line. So to get over this, what you actually want to do is you want to convert that pencil line to a brush line, and then you want to take this whole image and flatten it. And what that does is it just makes that fill go to the edge instead of going all the way to the center. And now if you go back to your camera, you'll see that it's going to look a lot better at this point when you look at that animation from one to the other. And so that is pretty much it. Now maybe I might want to adjust a little bit more the position of these eyes. Like I might want to have those guys, and you might even want to scale these guys. You know, like this might be scaled, and I'm sorry I didn't set my pivot points properly, but you might want to have them scale up to there. Oops. Sorry. Alright, let's just... Oops. Okay, I want to go up there. Okay, now I can move my pivot point there. Okay, so now from this peg, you might want to have this scaled up a little bit when it's in the front, and then when it's moving over to the side, you'd want to squish it in and probably move it forward, something like that. And actually I put that keyframe over here. Let's put that keyframe on the same frame as the rest of it so that it's subtle. The thing is that when you're animating, you want it to be subtle, so you don't want it to look too crazy. But you do want to do the same thing with the other eye, because you'll notice the other eye now is not scaling, so it just doesn't look quite as good. But if I take the other eye, and I'm just going to really quickly shove my pivot point where it belongs, and I will scale this one in now as well, and I'll move that keyframe so that it's overlapping on the other side there, just so that I have my keyframe all in the same place. And now you see that scale happening. And since I overrode the overall positioning there on the second keyframe, I could take it even more. I could take it back again and I could move it a little bit more. Or I could undo that. Let's undo that move I did. So I did the scaling on the eyeball, and I could just go in here on the eyeball layer instead of overriding all of those keys. And I can just put that scale for the eyeball on the other frame. So now you get that animation happening here. So that's what I want to do for this week. I apologize for the artwork being a little bit quickly put together here, but what I will do is, as we go through this next week, I can go through this in more detail, and I can actually maybe show a few more advanced concepts. But if you get these initial concepts, and that's the main thing. From here, you know, if you want to change the shape of the face, now that's something else. You can change the shape of the face by morphing from one shape to another shape to get a really full look on that. Or what some other people do is they'll break the head up into a couple of different pieces, and then they can animate those pieces around to create a full shape. So, you know, there's a couple of different ways of accomplishing that, and there's no right or wrong way. They're just different ways of doing it. But hopefully you can see, just from a simple demonstration like this, how the value is added to this. And next week I'll also show you an example that takes this a step further, just so that you can see, you know, what a final version of something that's done in this manner would look like. So thanks for staying tuned, and we'll see you next week.